and they're not so smart. It's not like Klaus Schwab is a genius. These are just power hungry clowns, and they happen to be born to other power hungry clowns. And just like the Habsburgs were all, hemophiliacs, these people will all bleed to death, and it'll be over.
Yeah, I remember, being on this path for so long, and then every now and then you get that little, what I'll call God shot. And I'm just driving down the road, minding my own business, and here's a bumper sticker on the car ahead of me. It says, "Honest money for honest people." That's it. It's that simple.
Rafi here from the End Game Investor, and today I've got a treat for you. This is David Morgan of the Morgan Report. And like our series of interviews that I've done since the beginning, I want to get to know how he got here, who he is, what drove him into this crazy mess of a world we're in. I'm going to start by just like shooting off on where we are now, not in terms of the gold and silver markets in particular, but the situation of the current world. And it's completely, I never thought that I'd be alive in this sort of thing that is going on here in a global sense. Maybe deep down somewhere I knew that this sort of thing would happen, meaning we're in a very unstable time where politically things are just being upended, and the monetary system is sort of dovetailing with that in terms of the political upheaval that's happening in Ottawa, and where I am in Israel, and also in the U.S., just everywhere. And it's the core of it right now is in Ottawa, but the flames of liberty are burning right now. And more than in any other, let's say, financial industry, I find that the people in the gold and silver movement, they're less, it's not that we're not about making money. We're all about making money, obviously. That's what we all want to do. That's why we're in any industry that we're in. We want to make money because that's how we make a living. But really, the core of it is we want to be the core of a message. We want to be part of a message. And that is why we're doing this. And we say, by following this message and by being part of the sound money movement and by returning sound money to humanity, you can obtain a lot of purchasing power and a lot of wealth for yourself. And that's a great thing. It is. But unlike, let's say, someone who's just going into the finance industry to try to maximize returns and match some kind of statistical goal of 8% a year, 10%, whatever it may be, it's more, we're trying to get people to attach themselves to a certain moral standard in finance. That's how I came to this movement. And I want to ask David, I want to ask you, how did you get here? How long have you been here? And what made you become a sound money promoter? What did you see that made you be who you are today?
Well, we don't have 3 hours. What happened, Rafi, was when I was 11 years old. Before that, we lived on 1 acre in San Diego County, and I had to water my dad's fruit trees every weekend, which when you're a 10-year-old kid seemed to take forever. It was like, I don't know, 15 minutes per tree, and there were 25 trees. But I was given 25 cents a week. And way out in the country, I wasn't any place to spend it. And I'm just kind of naturally a saver anyway. And I probably had about $10 worth over so many weeks that would be. And one day my dad gave me a quarter, and it was a Johnson slug. And I realized that that quarter wasn't silver. I didn't really know what it was made of, but it obviously wasn't silver anymore. And that kind of bothered me. I sort of instinctively knew something was different. I didn't know what, and I thought it had some significance to it. But no one around me seemed to have any thought about it whatsoever.
I just interrupt you for a second. How did you know it wasn't silver? How old are you?
Because of the way it looked. Yeah, because when I held it on its edge, it was copper colored. So you could just visually look at it, let alone drop it on a table and it would sound different. Just visually, you could see the copper in it, whereas all the other ones were 90% silver. So you could tell just by a quick visual inspection, it wasn't silver.
So this is without any training. You just knew to
no training, nothing, just observation.
All right.
So that didn't go anywhere. I didn't say at that moment in time, I'll be the silver guru or any of that. Just like I noticed it, the adults didn't. And so then I got interested, always been fascinated about money. And my dad asked me what I want to do for a living. And I said, I basically want to be in the financial industry. And he just went berserk. And no, you're not doing that. He was having a really, was not very happy with the stockbroker. And, you know, those guys, you know, just a lot of negativity was flying in my direction. So that weekend, I read the career guide that came with the World Book Encyclopedia. I am a bit of a nerd. And I read the whole thing, which is not a very long read. And, you know, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. And I read airline pilot. And I thought, you know, now this was years later, a few years later. So, you know, I'm not saying like the next day. So I was 11 when the coinage changed. I'm now about 8th grade. I'm thinking about, you know, money. My dad's asking me what I want to do. So I'm reading this career guide and I come up with airline pilot. So I actually ended up in a flying career. But I was still interested in money. I'm fascinated with this concept that you could invest and make money by investing. I love the idea of the American dream, which I call it that, where you could, you know, you have an idea, Rafi, but you don't have enough capital. So me and my friends and your family and a few others pull our money together so you have enough to start up this business and it works and we love the product and you get rich and I get rich and the people get rich because you've enriched their lives by this new product, right? So to me, it's a paradox of you get to do well and so does everybody else. I love that idea. So that was kind of in the background. So I started an aircraft career. I was actually a crew member on a couple of the airplanes that are of note. I won't go there right now. And I'm sitting there out on the flight line with some of the top test pilots in the world waiting to do engine runs. And one of them pulled out this newsletter. I never knew what a newsletter was, but these guys are obviously making more than the average bear and they've got money to invest. And I'm, you know, 22 years old now, and they're talking about the real economy. And this is something that I've already been learning and studying on my own. And he starts to read this aloud to the other test pilot. And I'm in the background as the engineer, just sucking up everything. And I asked him, you know, well, who is this? Well, in those days, there was no internet. You had to actually, you know, find an envelope, write a check, put the guy's name on it, mail it to him, and you would get a letter, physical letter in the mail. So that's how I got interested in what then was called the hard money movement. And the more I learned about it, the more, you know, you learn about people in the field. So, you know, Jerome Smith, the original silver guru, Harry Brown, who worked for him, the Aiden sisters who were trained by Jerome Smith, and I became a newsletter junkie and I just couldn't get enough of the honest money idea. And then I started going to conferences and I'll never forget the first one. I didn't go directly. In fact, the first one wasn't one I attended. The first one I was introduced to was through back then cassette tapes. It'd be like a CD now or MP3 file. And I listened to all the speakers because you could buy the tapes after the event. And I was commuting on my aircraft job and I was listening, and I'll never forget Jim Dines, who really influenced me. Many did, but he had kind of the biggest impact at that time. And he said, all that exists in the universe is truth or resistance to it. Now, those are pretty profound words for me because we're in the truth movement, and, you know, and I know how smart you are. I've listened to enough of your stuff, and I love intellectuals, male or female. I just love people that think deeply. And so that's a pretty profound statement. So it says all that exists is truth or resistance to it. And in the time I have made that statement, a dollar is not a dollar because they've printed more and watering the milk never works. And he went on from his speech from that premise. So that's probably enough for you to comment on. Or
yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is I know people call me a deep thinker and this and that, and look, I accept that because I spend most of my time thinking. That's just how I was built, how I was born. That's the gift that God gave me, and I just think all the time, and it's exhausting, really, because there's really just nothing else I do. But if we put it more simply, like I kind of think very shallowly, because you know, with a lot of people in our movement, we see all this like fake thinking going around, and this thinking that sounds sophisticated, but really when you dig underneath it and you look for its foundations, there's nothing there. And there's nothing like a lot of this academic thinking that's going on, and these sophisticated, like, you know, take like the typical sophisticated Keynesian idea of, they have this complicated mathematical equation in their heads where if they increase the money supply by X and integral X to Y and by whatever, and like they have all this math on their papers, and it amounts to absolutely nothing but social engineering, and it's all a bunch of BS. So in a way, I think deeply, but in a way, I think very shallowly, because I can tell, and I'm sure you can tell, the difference between bullshit and truth. And it just gets more stark and stark by the day, because pretty much everything we're hearing about politics and about what's going on in the world is BS. And it's hard to find truth anymore. And the only truth that you find is on these, by people like us that are, sort of on the edges of society or finance, or on the edges of the industries that we're on, regardless of how we're doing. And I'm sure many of us doing very well because everyone has gone crazy. But I'm going off on a tangent here, but you've been in this business a lot longer than I have. I've been in since 2012, since Ron Paul sort of woke me up, and I got and sort of answered all the questions that I had since I was a kid. And the main question I keep going back to that I had as a kid when I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old was, I asked my father, Abba, and it's his father in Hebrew, why do prices always go up? Because that didn't make any sense to me. Nothing that always goes up is stable. You can't just keep going up and stay stable in any system in nature. If you look at this any system in nature, it's all a negative feedback loop. It all goes in cycles of self-balancing loops. You can't have something that always goes up, because otherwise it just eventually explodes. And nobody can answer that question for me. And I was just resigned to saying, okay, whatever, the grown-ups are in charge, and I can't say anything, until Ron Paul answered it for me. And he said, it can't continue like this. It's going to explode. Now, since you've been here in this field, did you ever think that the world would get this crazy because of inflation? And I'm kind of tying inflation in the monetary sense to the social insanity that is going on. And I see a connection here. Did you think it would get this far?
Somewhat. I mean, first of all, you put yourself in my shoes. I've trudged my own path. So, I've got my own biases, and, life has taught me a lot. The best teacher's experience. But, if you look at the Harry Browns and, ran for president of the United States on the libertarian ticket, and, many of these others, we all really expected, me being a generation behind them, that we would see repercussions from this phony fiat fiesta sooner than we have. But what I did learn along the way in my own study, and I've voiced it many times, but it always bears repeating, is that there is a direct correlation between the debasement of a currency and the debasement of the moral structure of society. They go hand in hand, Rome being the easiest one for most people to understand, because most people, although they might not be as studious as you and I, have a vague understanding that the Roman Empire was built on basically honest money at the beginning with the denarius that was almost pure silver, and at the end it was a copper coin just plated with silver. And during that time frame, it went up and down and up and down, but generally it went down, and it went from a republic where the senators really did represent the people to a plurocratic system. Sorry, I can't say it. Plurocrats running and going for the state treasury and grabbing as much goodies as they could before the whole system burned down. So I think that's a very important point, is that this decadence creeps into everything as you debase the currency. I've made the statement, and agree or disagree, when you can lie about money, you can lie about anything. If you tell me that this piece of paper that's printed by a private corporation has value because they tell you, and if you don't believe it, the government's there with a gun to back it up by force. As Harry Brown always said, government is force. He didn't say he wasn't left or right. So I'll leave it there. I want your feedback, but it just irritates me that, one, I'm grateful in a way at my age that it didn't explode as early as I expected it to, but I am at the same time more concerned than ever because I have kids, and the moral decline is much more debased than I ever imagined. I mean, things are beyond belief for me, being conservative in nature, libertarian primarily. You can do darn near anything you want. as long as it doesn't affect me. But when you do so much stuff that is against nature, and I'm not talking about global warming, I think you can catch my drift.
Yeah, I know what you're
It's
talking
very upsetting.
Yeah. Look, I over the past 2 years, I've had these sorts of thoughts. Like I can't believe the moral depths to which people have sunk. And I have two questions stemming from, what I'm going to say here. The first question, and don't answer yet because I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. My first question is personally, and I'm speaking from a personal perspective, since let's call it the end of the world as we know it, since the new era that started in March 2020, and we all know what we're talking about. Um, I've had I've had breaks with friends. I've had seems to be irreparable breaks with immediate family. Not all of my immediate family. Thank God I have some connections left, but some people in my immediate family have been in support of the segregation that is going on. And after being, educated in a religious Jewish institution for all my life in America, and now I'm in Israel, but educated with a consciousness against Holocaust mentality, meaning, what happens when people start segregating you and treating you this way? What do you got to do? You've got to set off the alarms and, go the other direction, which is exactly what I did because I see what's happening. And I'm not an idiot, and I'm not going to explain it away just because it has a different excuse. I mean, so my first question is how. I'm sure some relationships in your life have ruptured. I'm not sure. I'm not going to ask you specifically what they are, but how do you forgive the people that have turned that have turned on you or turned on us and turned on civilized society? How, when this is over, and it will be over because humanity always recovers. I'm not a pessimist. I know we're going to get through this. I just don't know who's going to survive on the end of it. We're all going to get through this. How do you see yourself treating the people who, went the wrong way to the dark side? And we all know what that is. My second question. Well, let's just deal with that first. We'll get to the second one. How are we gonna look at the world on the other side of this whenever it happens?
Well, I think the first question for me, and not to make it overly dramatic, forgive them for they know not what they do. I mean, I anticipate answers at times. I try to stay open-minded. When we started our conversation, one of the points I wanted to bring up was the movie I was in. And it's not about me being in this movie. Believe me, I'm not the star. But the Four Horsemen film, you can see it on my webpage, the Morgan Report. Just go to the About tab, scroll down, and you can watch the Four Horsemen film for free. And in the beginning of that movie, Julian Tennant talked about, she was from the Financial Times. She's still around, very bright lady. And she talked about, the whole thing was about the end of the age of empire. But one of the basic premises that she said, which I just really resonated with me, is if you could control the cognitive map, she's British, so she's saying if you could control the way people think, then you basically got them. And that, I think, is very important. So when you're answering your question, forgive them for they know not what they do, so many people have been taught to believe rather than think. And I'll tell you another story I've said on many interviews, but we haven't had a one-on-one before. This was a long time ago. My kids are very small, so looking 30 years ago. Ralph Nader spoke at an event that I attended. And I liked Ralph for his ethics and his sincerity and his heart, but he doesn't know crap about economics. Sorry.
Right. He also seemed to me like a good guy that really doesn't understand what he's saying, but he has good motivations, it seems.
That's how I see him.
Yeah.
But what he said resonated with me. So we used to have these great discussions around the dinner table. And one day, me and my brother were sitting down with my dad and mom. And my dad says, "What did you learn in school today? Were you taught to think or were you taught to believe?" Mm-hmm. And that just sums it up. So the vast majority has got the cognitive map where they're thinking controlled by the state. And I would say deliberately, the way things have been done for generations now. So they believe they're doing the right thing by doing what they're told to do. And so I forgive them because they don't really know what they're doing. They think they have free will, but they really don't. And from the philosophical side, if I can just dip in there briefly, free will requires self-responsibility. And most people would rather have the state be responsible than themselves. Most people are too cowardly, in my opinion, and I've got a few years, to really own the responsibility it takes to be truly free. Mm-hmm. And your second question, you're gonna have to throw it back at me, or we could talk more about this one if you'd like.
Well, I'll just build off what you were saying. Coincidentally or not, when I was in high school, I was still always a thinker, and always just trying to dig more deeply into these subjects. And one of the things I thought about a lot was free will. And I wasn't expecting to ask this or talk to you about this or anything, but I guess we can continue this conversation on this topic. I actually wrote a book on free will. It wasn't published or anything. It was just something I wrote in high school, just like typing on my computer, just because I had these thoughts. And it's sort of based on all the Jewish philosophy that I read. And, I took a lot of Talmudic classes. I mean, I'll speak for a second just about the set of books behind me. That's the Babylonian Talmud, right? And if you don't know about it, it's rabbinic discussions about Jewish law. But the point is that it's not like what you have to do as a Jew. It's the discussions about how it developed, the side that was accepted and the side that was rejected. And it's all these discussions about how it came to be, which is the opposite of the let's say the environment that we're in now, which is there's one narrative and the other narrative has to be censored and shut it off. Like this, if people ask me how Jews survived through thousands of years of exile, whatever, it's the discussions and building the continuation off the discussions of the past. It's knowing both sides of the arguments, both sides of the debate, the correct side and the incorrect side, if you're going to call it that. So in high school, as I was writing this down, I kind of like came to this realization that free will is a very fleeting thing, even among the people who think for a living, right? Because as pleasure-seeking animals, right? We're looking for pleasure all the time. Like, we're going to pick pants out of a drawer, or on any given day, we're going to pick the pants that we want. Did we really have a choice in that? Not really. So, we're going to pick the food that we want. We're going to pick the food that we're in the mood for. Does our body want meat? Does our body want vegetables? Does our body want sugar? Whatever. It's not like we have free choice in this. We're going to pick whatever our body wants more, what gives us more pleasure. So most of our choices are in that, and not much more than that. But there is an instance where we all have free will, right? And that's what differs us from the animals, because we can either decide to follow our minds, what makes sense, or if it contradicts that, we can decide what gives us satisfaction in the moment. If we think deeper about that decision, there is a point in life where we have to decide a path in our lives, what makes sense versus what is expedient, right? What's good versus what is easy. And that is the hardest decision to make. And you can only make it maybe once really in your life, and maybe twice if you decide to change direction. If you decide you're on the wrong path and you decide to go back on the path, maybe once or twice in life. That's the free will decision. And that's what I see most people that are in our industry, right? I'm teamed up with Chris Marcus on a lot of initiatives. And he told me his story. He was like an options trader in Wall Street, and he just decided one day, this is all wrong. This whole system is corrupted, and he just decided with his free will as a human being to totally change his life because of what he knew. Right? It's not about what makes him more money. It's about what is right, and that's what I see in the people in this movement. People like you, people like me. And not everything I do is right, but I try to stay on the right path. Where do you think this is going? And how bad do you think it's going to get? And do you think we can survive? Do you think we can survive as a society with the direction that we're going in? Because it doesn't seem like we can in the way that we are. Where do you see an equilibrium reestablishing itself, and how do we get there?
Well, we've got to get to the bottom. This is a metaphor, but accurate for drug addicts, alcoholics, emotional people, and there's all kinds of, I'll call them plagues in quotation marks, that the human experiences. And the only way to get through it is to hit what's called the proverbial bottom. So as a society, we have to hit bottom. And we've just started down. And we're starting like, with my engineering background, and this without being an engineer, but if I take, potential energy, I take a baseball and I put it up 30,000 feet, like where an airplane flies, and I drop it. It starts at zero velocity, and then it's a function of the weight, the mass of the ball, and gravity of the earth, and it accelerates to what's called terminal velocity. So that is a metaphor for what I want to say. As we start down, we start to go, maybe a better metaphor is the snowball down the hill. It gains mass and momentum at the same time, and that's where we're going. We're headed down. So we need to hit that place, and I don't think it's that far off in time. Unfortunately, from all of my reading experience, thinking, and observation, it is going to be a pretty ugly place. But it doesn't mean that everything ends or it all stops, or there isn't some hope, or there isn't some, kindness and empathy and consideration. But for the most part, they're rare. So once we've established the bottom, and let's say the bottom entails a mass die-off as an example, that point, then enough will be, and I'm speaking for you, Rafi, so certainly you can interject that I'm incorrect, but a lot of us will say enough is enough. And as you said, in that decision of your life, it's like Chris Marcus. It's like, I've had it. This is it. Every fiber of my being is now going to be on this, dedicated to the resolve that I have for the remaining days, that I'm going to make it better, and my path is this. And not just as a metaphor, it's true action. And that may be a variety of different ways. So I'm afraid we have to go down further before we can start back up. Once we land that snowball or that baseball and it hits the ground and you've hit that bottom, and then there's kind of a static point momentarily where everything kind of gets shaken up, and there's kind of an awareness of, wow, I'm in a different state. I was in a zero state with potential. I went to maximum velocity, and now I'm at rest again. And where am I? I'm in a totally different place, and it doesn't look too good. What am I going to do about it now? I would say that's it. I do expect to see, I do expect to see a lot of shedding of tears as we traverse down this path that we're on.
Yeah, look, I agree. Well, I'm hopeful. I mean, for the first time in 2 years, I'm pretty hopeful that from what I'm seeing, especially in Ottawa and around Europe and different capitals and even Australia, I don't think we're at the bottom materially speaking. I think it's going to get worse materially for a lot of people. But I'm hoping, and I really hope that I'm right, that spiritually, I think we might have hit bottom, and I think we're headed back up. Because when I look at the dictatorship of the 1930s, and even before that, the length of slavery, like, let's say, the feudalist epoch that humanity was stuck in for centuries, and the amount of slavery that's been in the human race since anything before 1776, basically. We've all been slaves for most of our existence as a species. This time, from the 30s to now, I mean, the 30s, it took maybe like 12 years for the world to wake up, from like 1933 to 1945. After World War II was over, everyone finally woke up and said, what the hell did we just do? That was all nuts. And now, like, the real dictatorship started in 2020, and it's 2022, and it looks like people are starting to come out of it. At least, an important core of people are starting to come out. It only took 2 years, and it felt like a long time, because I've got 5 kids at home, and I can't send them to school because they're going to be persecuted by their teachers who make them, carry a mask. Even though I told them I will not allow my kids to wear a mask. If my kids wear a mask and they tell me that they wear a mask in school, I'm going to come after you. I'm not going to let them do it. So I can't send them to school anymore. And now the government's after me because school's a law here. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm saying I think we're waking up. I think 2 years. That's a nice time for the average Joe in the street to wake up. It seems that people have woken up morally, and I'm encouraged. How do you, basically, my last question is, how do you feel about this? Do you think we've reached a spiritual bottom, but not a material bottom? Do you think we have more to go spiritually downward, or are we at a turnaround point? What do you think?
Tough one. First of all, it's opinion. And, we had a brief chat before, and I'm going to digress slightly, but, everyone's got an opinion. I get that. But, when a lot of people ask me, what's your opinion of this? I said, I don't have one. What do you mean you don't have one? Because I haven't looked at it and studied it long and hard enough to form an opinion, So I just want to throw that out there as I digress to come back. First of all, I'm pretty certain that more of that materially we haven't, with all the supply chain breakdown and people don't want to go back to work, and the physical economy being as a complex structure, and complex societies deteriorate rather rapidly. So that part I'm pretty solid about. As far as spiritually, I think all of your points were well taken. Probably because of my age, I'm a little more pessimistic than you. I think there could be it'd be like a downward trend. We're getting that up right now. It looks good. There's pushback. We may even be lulled into thinking that we've won, only to see something come out of the parasites at the top that rule over us, throw another one at us, and they are able to take the cognitive map or thinking and divert it again. And some of those that thought they'd won start to, let's say, give in to new pressures that are usually not valid, yet they are unaware, been, I'll say, tricked into believing without thinking it through. So I'm not sure is my real answer, but I would guess we have not seen the end yet of the ability of these clever, not smart, clever people to continue on the degradation of humanity by way of getting them to agree without them really being conscious of it to go along with their plan. So I'm a little more pessimistic, but I hope you're right.
Well, it might be a function of my age. It might be a function of my philosophy. It might be a function that I have to be positive, or else I'm going to lose my mind. So I really have no choice. Because if you lose all positivity and you're just you're just pessimistic all the time, then why wake up in the morning? So you have to look for.
Well, let me add to that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I really honor you and I try to be fair with everyone. But so what I just said, I mean, the metaphor would be, the underdog against the heavyweight champion, and he gets knocked to the mat, and I'm putting words in your mouth, and he gets up. That's the end of it. And I'm saying, no, they hit him one more time, and everyone's going, oh, and they're counting him out, 1, 2, and they were up to 9, and the guy gets up, stands up, shakes it off, and knocks this bastard off, over. So, and I also too believe we win. But I'm also saying, and that's just a metaphor, that we might have further down to go. But I do agree, and I want this to be, that's why I interrupted, I'm sorry, that I do think we're very close. I just think it may take one more test. I don't think it takes 10 more. I don't think it takes 5 more. It may take 1, may take 2, but I don't think we're far off. But I am a little remiss to say I think that's it. I see how these people operate. For years, Rafi, I've said you've got to think like a criminal. I'm not one, but if you don't think in their paradigm, you're probably not going to be able to think deeply enough to try to get a fairly accurate forecast of what the next step 2 or 3 might look
like. Right. 100%. I agree. So the last thing I'll say, and we'll close it off, is that people like David and I, we're seen as doomsdayers, and we want to, the monetary system to collapse and all this. But really, the way I see it, is that once the monetary system collapses, once fiat money, once the gold value of a dollar or the silver value of a dollar can no longer be extracted from the money substitute that is the printing of the dollar. And when a dollar is printed, they are extracting the existing gold or silver value from that dollar. When there is no more for them to extract, and it doesn't matter if they have a digital, a CBDC or whatever it is that they're going to do, once they can no longer extract value from the public through money printing, through the process of inflation, they will lose control of everything. That is the only thing that I'm saying that I'm absolutely sure of, because that always happens. When they lose control of the monetary system, they lose control of everything. And this time, this is the first time where this process of inflation is a global process. It is not isolated to one specific country. It is everywhere. And once the people, and I see hyperinflation as the people fighting back against this, I don't see it as a tragedy. Once the people fight back against this and bring the demand for money, their money substitutes, their monopoly money substitutes to zero, then they've lost control. And they're not so smart. It's not like Klaus Schwab is a genius. These are just power-hungry clowns, and they happen to be born to other power-hungry clowns. And just like the Habsburgs were all, hemophiliacs, these people will all bleed to death, and it'll be over. So on that note, final thoughts from David, and I'll say good night.
Well, I don't know if I want to add on. I love having the last word. Just going back to kind of the overall theme, if I may, I remember, being on this path for so long, and then every now and then you get that little, what I'll call God shot. And I'm just driving down the road, minding my own business, and here's a bumper sticker on the car ahead of me. And it says, "Honest money for honest people." That's it. It's that simple.
Yeah. Just seeing that just makes you feel better, and
it made me feel great. I just felt great.
Yeah, it does. It's just simple things. All right, this is Rafi, the Endgame Investor, speaking with David Morgan, the David Morgan Report, the Morgan Report, and you can find all his links at the bottom of the description below. If you want to subscribe to his newsletter, highly recommend it. He's a great guy. So are all the people in this industry, and I'm glad to talk to them all. And I will see you hopefully next week with a new interview with a new interesting person.